And you read a lot of poetry. You know, you read Robert Creeley and Leroy Jones, as he was known then. And you had communications with people at some of the colleges, and some who were just on the street. There was one kid I know who I just met. I said, come on in. You might as well live here just as long as you write. So you were kind of under the radar. And I think that's pretty much what the underground poet is. Under the radar, writing, publishing. It may not be good, but it's genuinely felt. And,
what do you mean by that, genuinely? Other poets wouldn't genuinely feel?
I don't think so. I think if you look at some of our major poets, they're either grand entertainers or they're practitioners of poetry as an art, but they're not interested in self or community or the world as it exists around them.
Okay. Now, one of your peers and contemporaries, Amari Baraka, died, and he was a controversial poet from the Black Arts Movement until his tenure as poet laureate in New Jersey. I guess he had that controversial poem about 9/11 where he sort of implied that Jews were, this was a conspiracy.
Yeah.
What is his legacy? What did you feel about him?
For me, Baraka opened a door when he was Leroy Jones. He came to Baltimore, I remember, and he spoke at Morgan College. And that was the day when he was wearing a tweed jacket and tie. And on the campus, you wore a jacket and a shirt and a tie. And he spoke to the students. And myself and a few others asked him to come visit us in downtown Baltimore. And he did. He came with us. He took the bus into town, stopped at the local store and picked up a fifth of Morgan David Concord grape. And he sat on the floor and talked to us.
A Jewish wine?
Yes. Yeah.
He was married to a Jewish woman in the first,
Yeah, I think he went through some changes in his life. But the thing is, he talked to us about his poems. And for me, his poetry was so fascinating because it was intellectual. It was very beat-oriented. Some of it was about music. Some of it was about being blue. But whatever it is, he opened the door about language for me. And his generosity, as far as others were concerned, was so apparent. Politically, he became more Baraka than less Leroy. I thought the quality remained. But as with much of the Black arts movement, I felt the poetry sometimes was not political as well as simplistic. It seemed to lack some kind of impact or staying power, at least for me. But he opened the door as a young, brilliant Black poet.
And playwright.
Yeah, and playwright,
yes. Dutchman.
Yes, and also novelist. He was a real, how should we say, Renaissance person.
Yeah, Renaissance man.
Yeah.
Now, you're from Baltimore, but you've lived for years in Boston. Yeah. If you were from Boston, if you originally, your roots were from Boston, do you think you'd been a different poet? And in what way do you think, or be the same cloth that you are now?
You mean if I stayed in Baltimore?
No, if you were, instead of being from Baltimore, you were from Boston. Do you think, how do you think you would differ?
Good question.
And you're a man of 79, right? So of your era?
Somewhere around there.
Yeah. And so of that era, you would be coming, there was an era in Boston, and there was an era in Baltimore. So it was, I don't know if it's a different sensibility.
Good question. Well, I wouldn't have had the same influences. I wouldn't have met the same people.
Like who?
Well, I wouldn't have met Baraka at Morgan College because I've been in Baltimore. I wouldn't have had an opportunity to read poetry in a coffee shop for 3 or 4 years as I did in Baltimore.
Why wouldn't you have that opportunity in Boston?
Well, because the coffee shop, I don't know. It's just that this coffee shop was in Baltimore.
Oh, okay.
I wouldn't have had an article in the Baltimore Sun. I wouldn't have someone walk up to me after reading an article in the Baltimore Sun asking me if they could help me, if there was anything I needed or wanted. I wouldn't have had the contact with Baltimore socialists and communists. I wouldn't have had the resources of the Baltimore Public Library, which is so different from the library in Boston.
I was going to ask you, do you think subsequent generations of poets, of African American poets, Cave Canem, the Dark Room Collective, how does their direction differ from what was going back in your day? What do you know?
It might have a lot to do with where I was born and where I lived. I was born when the toilets were in the backyard, and you read by lamplight, and you got 5 cents worth of oil to light the lamp to read by. And we lived by the Booker T. Washington Code, the slave code. What you read is what you make of yourself. And you felt a sense of identity with the past that was not the past after the Black Arts Movement. But most of all, I won't say I'm unique, but I'm really different. So I don't know if it made any difference. I think most poets grew up the traditional way. Your school, you write a few things on the back of a paper bag, you type them. Eventually, you become academically formed and shaped. But I was influenced by people like Richard Wright and Dostoevsky. They were prose writers, but they were people with a sense of mission, had a sense of what the West meant in terms of literature.
Well, how about, but does, you're familiar with Cave Canem and some of the poets and the Dark Room, Major Jackson, and all that. How do you think they're differing from your milieu?
I think they are smarter, much more academically inclined.
Smarter?
Yeah.
You mean knowledgeable or just intrinsically smarter?
Knowledgeable, smarter. Right. I'm at best a maverick. I'm the guy that goes to poetry readings with a fifth of whiskey and sometimes overreacts because I think the poetry is so irrelevant.
You were a real maverick in the Cambridge scene in the 60s and 70s, weren't you?
Yeah, more or less like a Colin Wilson outsider. I don't have a sense of place. I don't particularly want to be associated with poets or poetry, but I want to be associated with the truth that poetry can present to the page. I think that they are good, traditional people. I think that I'm a little peculiar. You can see the mixture, just that I've got the tie on the sweater. It's sort of warm outside. I've got the green, eye patch, so to speak. My hair is very naturally set, as if my fingers just went through it. They're a different set of people and a different set of circumstances.
Okay. Now,
I like the Black Arts people better, although I think the substance was questionable.
Well, if you had to define Black Arts, what would that be?
Poetry by black men who define themselves differently from a generation of Negro artists, men and women, who were politically committed and very much, inspired by the shortcomings and the failures of the civil rights movement to recognize people who lived on the streets and day to day. It's very much a people's poetry, very frank, very graphic, and so forth and so forth. Yeah.
Now, there was a theatrical treatment of one of your books. Which was that?
Folks Like Me.
And that was what did that book concern?
It's a collection of poems, but it follows the usual pattern of most of my books. It moves from the past, slavery, uh, through the 30s and into the 40s, and it stops just at the beginning of the Civil Rights period.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a panorama of American history from a black perspective. But it was so unique, however, that Richard Widmark figures, into the book, as well as the Green Hornet.
Oh, okay.
That it's all, the experience of a black man coming of age.
Okay. And who put this? Who made it? Who did the theatrical?
Marshall Hughes of the Roxbury Community Theater.
Okay.
Or the Roxbury Repertoire Theater.
Okay.
Yeah.
Was it a musical or?
It was poetry with music.
Okay. And how did that work, you think?
I was quite amazed at what they did, because it had exactly what I intended, but more realized than anything that I thought I could ever do. It starts with a woman walking on the stage. It's a white woman, and she talks about her mother. Now, in the book, the voice is black and it's mine. And then another person walks on stage, and it's a man. I believe it's black. But you have this racial mix of people reading this poem, which is originally by and spoken by a black man. So the play becomes something which is cross-racial and gender. Mm-hmm. And it has more of a universal, less provincial touch to it.
Okay. Okay. That's interesting.
And it certainly reflects my view of the world as I see it now.
Okay. And that is?
Pretty much in a global, non-racial, non-class sense.
Okay.
Yeah.
Excuse me for a minute. Turn it off. If you had to choose one of your books as a signature one, which would you say that would be? That's a good question. I wouldn't know quite how to answer that. Mm-hmm. Generations or?
Well, I think about being normal like my friends are. I would say it's my most recent book.
By the Ibbetson Street Press, which we were very thrilled to have you publish you. And so maybe you can read some poems from there. You've got about 10 minutes. And
okay.
That'd be good.
Okay, but I should also say I would put also Apron's Full of Beans in there for a reason, because Apron's Full of Beans traces the growth of black and white history through icons and popular cultural figures and so forth. Okay.
Choose whatever you want.
Okay. You were going to ask me something, though, about Ferguson, I think, too.
Oh, yeah, I was going to ask you about I was going to say, so often political poetry fails. I mean, if you were to address the Ferguson, Missouri controversy we're having now with the riots and the shooting of the young African-American, I mean, how would you go about it?
Well, again, I'd have to really think about it, but it would probably be through different voices. The same event told from different perspectives, because we really don't know what happened. One thing we know that it's not a war on men, black men. If you want a war, you go to Korea or you go to Afghanistan.
Well, some people would say that it's a racist police department.
Yeah, and we have the same hype that we've had, in the past. We don't know what happened, and I think to arrive at a conclusion, since that, I'll say it's a war on black men and so on and so forth, completely obscures the issue. It's such angry hype. And I think that's where I differ from the poets of the Black Arts movement. I wanted to see things from a different point of view.
And so you take it from both points of view, right? You would.
You have to, and that's what makes, say, Dostoevsky so interesting, and Richard Wright so interesting, and James T. Farrell so interesting, because they're trying to find the truth, and you.
And it always lies between something, right? It always lies. It's always in between something, isn't it?
Yes, yes. And one of the wonderful things about Richard Wright is he took an unsympathetic character that was so offensive that even James Baldwin made a career out of writing about how Wright did not do, say, justice to
Is this Black Boy or?
Well, he was referring to Native Son,
Okay,
Character
okay.
Bigger Thomas.
Okay.
Didn't do justice to the truth about the American experience in terms of black and white men.
Okay.
But anyway,
That's interesting.
there is a poem here, if I can find it, because it's about Leroy. And here you go. It's called "The Dead Lecturer is Down." And that book by Leroy Jones was called "The Dead Lecturer," published by Grove Press, which is one of the big books of poetry in my life. And I still
And the
have
Grove Press was a very influential.
Yes.
It's still around, isn't it? The Grove.
Yeah, they're
Yeah.
not doing the same stuff.
Yeah.
And it's dedicated to a young man named Roger Tazwell. Roger Tazwell was that young man that I invited into my home with the idea that he would write. And I always thought that he was much better than I would ever be. I don't know what happened to him. He disappeared. This is an interesting story. And then he reemerged.
Mm-hmm.
I hope we have time.
Yeah.
But he reemerged, and he was very incoherent,
Yeah.
babbling.
Yeah.
And we always thought that somehow he was picked up by the FBI or the CIA because he spoke of something which was going to occur. And shortly after, Malcolm X died.
Oh, okay.
But we were in that period, all of us, when we were being observed and watched. Anyway, this is to Roger Tazwell.
And this was in Baltimore?
In Baltimore,
Yeah.
yeah. We were a group of poets and radicals.
Did you have a name of
No, we were just in a house downtown. You didn't have black and white, male and female living in the house in Baltimore, in a downtown section in that day.
And you did?
Yeah.
So the it's sort of like the Darkroom Collective. They lived in Cambridge, except
Yeah.
it was more on
Yeah.
the line when you were there.
Right. They were a little more respectable. These
Yeah.
were really like bums. There were some Johns Hopkins students there. We were really basically bums. There were a couple of people who were Marxists. But anyway,
Okay.
yeah. The Dead Lecturer is down. Leroy is a street poem. Going by, a little jig in his step. His legs break at the knee, ready for a tap dance. His jive is cool and talking baby, not a child or woman man. He says, "What's up, baby?" Roy is going by.
Okay.
And that's a reference to that time when he came to the house. And across from that is a Langston Hughes poem. And I had this wonderful contact with Langston Hughes through mail. I had a pamphlet published by a political bookstore, Communist Party. And they sent the book all around. And one of the places they sent it to was Langston Hughes. And he graciously sent me a letter, a little note, so encouraging. And to find a poet again to do that in the black community, perhaps to a kid that's living from hand to mouth day to day, was just so unusual. Langston has his Harlem on the typewriter keys, on Lenox Avenue and after hours, men and women, jazz and the soul and Louis Armstrong's horn, Bessie Smith, song, trouble in Billy's life, a country of my own. Langston, your Harlem is what you have given me. And of course, it was sort of great being alive when Langston Hughes was around.
And he lived in Harlem, right?
Mm-hmm.
Didn't he live in Harlem? It's
He was all
a key
over the
figure in
place.
the Harlem Renaissance.
Yeah. Langston wasn't exactly in favor then,
Right.
but he's back now. Yeah.
Was he open about his homosexuality then also?
No. I think that's I think that's out more now than then. Yeah. Yeah. I hope, by the way, I answered some of your questions, because I know sometimes when you answer questions, you don't always get the answers you want.
Well, I don't want you to give me answers that you think I want. I want you to give me.
Yeah, okay, but I might have left something out.
Oh, no.
Okay. This one is called Baltimore in the Spring.
Okay.
It's funny, a lot of these poems come from that period.
What year would this you say?
This is 60s.
Early?
Yeah.
Okay.
I worked as a... they created a position for me at the Baltimore Public Library. And the library was in a blue-collar white community, Polish. Next to it, there was one block that was Indian and then black. And there was a riot, I remember there, at one point, that started in the Polish community around the library. It wasn't the traditional black riot, this was into the black community, beating up people and so forth. Anyway, there's a picture of me, which you can't see,
Yeah, it's small.
in my teens. Anyway, and I would walk to those neighborhoods to work every morning. Sometimes after work, strolling along the white side of town and listening to Sinatra crooning, "What is America to me? But he has the world on a string." And you almost see him sway, fingers snapping, so cool in his suit, thin tie. It breaks the heart, the young children in their front yards. Schools close for the day. The women in the windows chatting. On these side streets where the Polish live in Baltimore, there are narrow sidewalks, clean swept. The women are home in the afternoon. The old man at work, a butcher, a cop, working men, breadwinners, the flower boxes lined up in the window sills. These streets closed to the Negro streets are almost friendly. Now and then someone behind a door, hidden by a low banging shade or curtain, calls me a coon, so softly, almost whispered. I smile. I know this is Baltimore and spring has just begun. You know, maybe I would say this is that book, because in the front page here, beautifully designed by my wife, by the way, it's my best looking book, is the house across the street from where I was born. And that picture goes back to Baltimore, a Baltimore that no longer exists.
So we could say this was your signature book.
I guess it is.
Okay.
My wife designed it, did a beautiful job.
And we
It
published
was published by a really great friend and a good person.